Okay, last session in JavaScript, we learned how to handle how do we handle and work with input operation. So we learned one example, that is form input by using various form elements, how to input value. These are the basic points we learned, right? Now today we will discuss about the language basics. So we will learn about the JavaScript language basics. So language basics. Already what you learned is about how to use JavaScript with HTML. Means how to integrate, how to handle input and output. What are the input and output properties? We discussed about that. Next, after understanding all those general methods, you need to learn about basics. Technically, what are the language basics you need to know? Generally, in the language basics, we have to learn about variables, data types, operators, statements, and you need to understand about functions. These are the language basics. After understanding language basics, we can learn about object-oriented programming. Object-oriented features in JavaScript, how to handle them. Right. First, we need to learn all the basics of language. While learning these basics, we can implement some examples also, right? So in the language basics, you have to know about these points. So let's see one by one. So first important in the JavaScript language, we have to know about variables in JavaScript. We have to learn about variables technically. So what is a variable and how to handle variables? Let's see. Actually, first important point, variables are storage locations. Variables are storage locations in memory where you can store a value and use it as a part of any expression. Variables are storage locations. Variables are storage locations in memory. Technically, variable is a storage location in memory where you can store a value and use it as a part of any expression. That is how generally we define variables. You want to deal with some values in your interactions, then the values need to be stored in memory so that we can access them later and use them. For that, we have to allocate a location in memory through variables. Variables are used for allocating storage locations in memory so that we can store our values. And important is variables are configured. Variables are configured in three ways. Variables are configured in three ways. Variables are configured in three ways. So variables technically configured in three ways. Actually, while learning about variables, you need to know about the three ways of how they are configured actually. They are configured in three ways. What are those three ways? Actually, variable comprises of number one, declaration. Second, it contains assignment or rendering. Third, it contains initialization. So variable configuration contains three methods. You can say configured in three methods: a declaration method, assignment, and initialization. Variables are configured in three methods: declaration, assignment or rendering, and initialization. First, as a programmer in any computer programming language, while working with variables, you need to know these three different methods. First, you should know what is difference between declaration, assignment, and initialization. These three important. When you define variables, they undergo these three options. Let's see. What is declaration, assignment, and initialization? These are the three configuration methods of variables. So for that, I will give you a simple example. We will see for that, right? Yeah. So the point is, what are those three techniques actually? What are those three methods actually? So let's see. Actually, suppose I am defining, so var x, that is one option. Var x equal to 10, that is another option. And after var x, so we have the option like, yeah. So after var x, yeah, we have some option like x equal to 10. That means like this we are defining. Right. So here var x and x is equal to 10 and var x is equal to 10. These are three options there. Now, we should know the important point that there are three options here to be configured. So one is declaration. One is declaration, right? And then another one is declaration. Another one is rendering or assignment. We have declaration, rendering or assignment. That is another point, rendering or assignment. One more important is we have initialization. So these are the three important points. So declaration and rendering and initialization. These are the points. Now, what is the concept here you need to understand? That is, the point is, when we are dealing with variables, these three techniques are important. So what are those three techniques? So the declaration, rendering, and initialization. Three parts. That means nothing but actually we have the declaration and rendering and assignment. That means in these three, you should know that this is declaration. This is rendering or assignment. And this is initialization. These are the three options. Declaration is only defining a variable. Declaration is defining a variable. And rendering is assigning value into that variable. Many people wrongly think that this is initialization. So x equal to 10, this is initialization. No, that is not initialization. Initialization means while declaring a variable, if you put some value into that while declaring, this method is called initialization. Understood? This is initialization. I will clearly explain with a practical example. You can understand. So what you need to know perfectly here is what is declaration, what is rendering, and what is initialization. Many times when we ask this, so the many people, they say the second one, they say it as initializing value. No, initializing value is not that. That is rendering value or assigning value. Initializing means while declaring itself, if you are providing a value into it, then it is called initialization. So while working with variables, if you know these three differences, then it will be helpful to understand our next point about variables. This is very important. So I hope everyone is clear what is declaration and rendering and initialization. That is important to understand. Actually, declaration is nothing but, so that means declaration, it is the process of defining a variable. It is the process of defining a variable. That means it is simply like var x. So that is declaration. Rendering or assignment, it is the process of assigning a value, assigning a value into declared variable. It is the process of assigning a value into declared variable. That means now in the syntax, we have var x and we have x is equal to 10. Then the first one is declaring and the second one is rendering. Third one is initialization. It is the process of assigning value into a variable while declaring. It is the process of assigning a value into variable while declaring. It is called initialization. That means the syntax will be like this. Var x is equal to 10. This is called initialization. Declaring, rendering, initializing. These are the three important points. So while working with variables, if you can understand these 3 points, then you can understand so many other concepts in variables. Let's see what they are. I hope everyone is clear now what is meant by declaration, rendering, and initialization. So variable configuration contains 3 methods: declaration, assignment, and initialization. Okay. Now what you have to know is JavaScript allows to render a variable without declaring. JavaScript allows to render a variable without declaring. That means declaration is not required. Without declaring. That is declaration is not required in JavaScript. If it is not in a strict mode. So if JavaScript is not in strict mode, then declaring variables is not required. JavaScript allows to render a variable without declaring. That is, declaration is not required in JavaScript. But remember, when it is not required in JavaScript, if it is not in strict mode, I told you what is strict mode. If JavaScript is in strict mode, then usually JavaScript variable declaration is mandatory. That means I will show you this. First, I will show you this point. So let's go to example. I will create here a simple variables.html. Okay. In this, we will not write any examples. First, we are learning the language. Just write a script. In the script, we write a function, f1. And we will call the function so that it executes. And here we are writing x is equal to 10. Document.write x is equal to plus x. That means document.write is an output function. And whatever value present in x. Remember, in this x equal to 10 is not declaration. It is not declaration. It is not declaration. It is rendering. It is rendering. Without declaring, you are directly rendering a value into it. You never declared x. So, but directly you assigned a value into it. Remember, this is not called initialization. This is called declaring. Right? This is called rendering. You are directly rendering. Now run this and see. When I run this and see, you can observe that it is working fine. So when we run this, you can see it is working fine. You can see x equal to 10 is working fine. There is no problem. I will open the console debugger F12 in the console. So there is no problem. There are no errors here. It's working good. So that means declaring of variable is not mandatory. Remember, declaring of variable is not mandatory if JavaScript is not in strict mode. You can directly render. That is what this point is saying. JavaScript allows to render a variable without declaring. That is, declaration is not required in JavaScript if it is not in strict mode. So that means this is valid. So syntax, this is syntax. This is an example. This is valid. So that means now x equal to 10, this is valid. Double slash is for comments, right? That is valid. X equal to 10, that is valid. It will work and it is working. You can see it is working. But important is variable declaration is mandatory when JavaScript is in strict mode. Variable declaration is mandatory when JavaScript is in strict mode. Variable declaration or initialization is mandatory. Variable declaration or initialization is mandatory when JavaScript is in strict mode. Suppose I turn on the strict mode. How to turn on the strict mode we learned. Above the function, we have to write use strict. What is strict mode? Already I explained. Now when I turn on the strict mode, and you can see that I refresh, we have an error. It says that x is not defined. That means it says that, so there is no declaration for x. It is not declared, x is not defined. But previously it was working. But when it is in strict mode, then it will not work. That means example here, syntax. Now the same program like this time in strict mode. Now this x equal to 10 is invalid. It shows a message that x is not defined. So declaration is mandatory. Declaration or initialization is mandatory. That means if JavaScript is in strict mode, then variable declaration is mandatory. So if anybody asks like, do I need to declare a variable in JavaScript? You can say that declaration is not mandatory in JavaScript if it is not in strict mode. If JavaScript is in strict mode, declaration is mandatory. So that means in this case, x is not declared. So it is not able to work. Now the question is how to declare variables. JavaScript variables can be declared can be declared by using so a var, let, and const. These are the three important keywords. In JavaScript, variables can be declared by using var, let, and constant. Now here important is what is difference between them. What is var, what is let, and what is const. JavaScript variables declaration or initialization is mandatory. Without declaring and initialization, you cannot use them. You cannot use them. If it is in strict mode. If not in strict mode, okay. Now the point is, okay, then how to declare variables? How do we declare variables in JavaScript? How to declare variables in JavaScript? What is the technique? Variables can be declared by using var, let, or const. For example, I am declaring, so var x. That means this is declaring. And when it is declared, I will refresh. It is working fine. I declared by using let x. And I said x equal to 20. I declared by using let. That's also working fine. That means you can declare by using var or let or const. Then the point is, what is difference between them? What is difference between them? What is difference between var or let or const? So that is important. What is difference between them is, so var, that means what is the difference between these three things? First one, var. Var is a keyword. So actually, the purpose of the var is, so many points are there. Var, it is used to define a function scope, define a function scope variable. Define a function scope variable. It is used to define a function scope variable. Function scope variable. That means you can declare in any block and access from any another block. From any another block. You can declare in any block and access from any another block. So access from any another block within the function. I will show you that. So it is used to define a function scope variable. And you can declare in any block and access from any another block. Within the function, you can do from anywhere. And important is var allows declaring, rendering, and initialization. That means you can declare, you can render, you can initialize. All these three are supported by var. All these three supported by var. I will tell you, I will show you here. First point, what is function scope? Let's explain these 2 points with example. Let's go here. I am declaring a variable here, var x. This is declaring, and x equal to 10, that is rendering, assigning. I am writing a condition. If equal to 10, then I will enter into a block. If is a block inside that function. Here I will define var y is equal to 20. This is initialization. Initialization means while declaring itself, you are defining a value. And I want to here outside the if function, I am printing document.write. I am printing x is equal to plus x. And in the next line, br, y is equal to plus y. I am printing the value of x and y. X and y. Remember, here y is a variable which is declared inside this block, but you are trying to access outside the block. So is it possible? Yes, it is possible. You declare inside the block. Actually, this is block. You can access even outside the block, because in a function you declare anywhere and you can access from anywhere. That you can do anywhere. So that is what actually function scope is. Now in this case, see here, I will refresh. Both are working fine. X equal to 10 and y equal to 20. That means var is allowing a variable to be declared inside the block and access outside the block. Because it is function scope. Even you declare in a block, you can access it outside it. Anywhere in the function, you can access it. That is function scope. Another point, here you can see var is supporting all the three options. What are those three options? This is declaring. And this is declaring. That line is declaring. And this is rendering. And this is initialization. All the three are working fine. So declaring, rendering, initialization, all the three are here. So this is working. And you can see this is working. So that is what the point here. Is. The point is, it is used to define a function scope variable. You can declare in any block and access from any block, any another block within function. Var allows declaring, rendering, and initialization. The example is this one. Another important point about variable is var. Another point about var is var allows shadowing. Var allows shadowing. Now here the question is, what is shadowing? Actually, var allows shadowing. That means it is the process. Of redeclaring, or you can say redefining or redeclaring the same name variable again in the scope. It is the process of redefining or redeclaring the same name variable again in the scope. That is what shadowing is. Var allows shadowing. What does that mean? For example, observe carefully. If x equal to 10, if the condition is satisfied, now inside this x equal to 30, what is it? This x equal to 30 is not shadowing. It is just rendering again. That means you are again rendering. Rendering means, so you are again assigning a new value into it. This is rendering. This is again called rendering only. This is also rendering. But if I define var x is equal to 40, like this, var x equal to 40, So that means I am declaring or initializing again. This is redefining. Redefining. And actually this is called shadowing. Shadowing. Already X is declared and you are again declaring and initializing value into it. See, you can again declare. So X declare. After declaring again X equal to 40, like this I can assign. You are declaring again and again rendering it, right? Redefining. And you can see that X equal to 40, it is working fine. This is called shadowing. In many interviews for freshers, they ask this, what is shadowing? Shadowing is the process of redefining or redeclaring the same name variable again in the scope. And where allows it. That means where allows to redeclare or redefine the variables. We call this mechanism as shadowing. That means this is valid. There is no problem in this technique. Because where allows it. That means already X is declared. You are declaring again X. That is valid. Actually, that is one important point about variables. This is an example for this point. So what is shadowing? What is redefining? That's important. Allows shadowing. Another important point about where is where allows hoisting. Where allows hoisting. Hoisting is nothing but it is a technique. Where you can declare the variable after using it in the logic. It is a technique where you can declare the variable after using it in the logic. That's something not allowed in many programming languages. Many programming languages, they don't allow this. They will not allow hoisting. JavaScript is using an interpreter. Due to that, JavaScript allows hoisting mechanism, right? What is hoisting? It is a technique where you can declare the variable after using it in the logic. That is something important. See, what I am talking about here is, I will remove all this. I am saying X equal to 10. Now, is it valid? It is not valid. Currently, it is not valid. Why it is not valid? Because I am in strict mode. Declaring is mandatory. Without declaring, you are trying to use it. And you can see it says X is not defined. Now observe carefully. What I am doing is, in the logic, I am declaring at the bottom where X. Means in the logic, after using it, I am declaring. Now what compiler will do, that means actually this is called, so X is hoisted by var. X is hoisted by var. Hoisted means now it tells the compiler, that translator, that declaration is here. Then automatically what happens is, the compiler or the interpreter that we are using here, that interpreter first comes to var. After that it goes to X. That means it doesn't bother about the order of declaration, which is not possible in many languages. If you are using various other languages, this is an error. It says that you are trying to use before declaring. But it is possible, especially when it is var. This is what hoisting means. So I will refresh this. You can see it is working fine. That means in other programming languages, it will be a problem. It will show an error. But here it is possible. It is possible. That means var supports hoisting also. Hoisting is nothing but it is a technique where you can declare the variable after using it in the logic. Now, why do we need such situations? You will understand later once we start working with the programming. Initially, we are just understanding the differences. And this is an example for hoisting. Hoisting means you can declare anywhere you want. Before using or after using, it will identify it and it will accept it and it will use it. These are all the points that you need to understand about var. That means var is used. Let's keep it as a heading, right? That is var. Var, right? It is used to define a function scope variable. And you can declare in any block and access from any block. Var allows declaring, rendering, and initialization. And var allows shadowing. And var allows hoisting. Var allows hoisting. What is shadowing and what is hoisting? I showed you with an example. That is one. Second important, you can declare by using LET. LET. Now, foolishly, some people ask, sir, what is full form of LET? Immediately, you can understand that that is the foolish question, right? Actually, LET generally, it is a computer term. It is a computer term. So, which is used for defining. That means let the variable. That means you are simply saying, it is just saying that let the variable. Let the variable. That means you are simply saying that in English, let it, right? That is what actually the let point here is. There is no full form for let. There is no full form for let, right? So var LET, what is difference with LET? LET. Actually, the point about LET is nothing but technically what is LET and how it is defined is usually LET is used for first point is it is used to define block scope variable. It is used to define block scope variable. It is used to define block scope variable. That means it is accessible only within the block where it is declared. It is accessible only within the block where it is declared. That is very important. That means actually the concept of LET is to define a block scope variable. Where is function scope variable? This is block scope variable. That means observe here, x equal to 10, fine. And if x is equal to 10, then a block is declared. Here, LET y, and y is equal to 20. And important here is same. LET allows declaring, rendering, and initialization. LET allows declaring, rendering, and initialization. So it will allow all the same things. But important is LET is block scope. Block scope variable means it is accessible. It is accessible only within the block where it is declared or initialized. So that means it is accessible only within the block where it is declared or initialized. That means you can see here LET y. I am trying to print x and y. Document.write x is equal to plus x. And in the next line, y is equal to plus y. We are trying to print x and y. And I will save this. I will save this here and refresh. You can see that. You can see that here it says y x is not defined. X is not defined. We are not declaring x. Okay, let's declare x. Var x. So because it is in strict mode, x is defined now. Okay, after x is defined, now it says y reference not defined. But already y is defined. Y is defined. We are declaring y. It is saying that y reference not found. Because it is saying that y is not declared inside this scope. Y is declared inside this if scope. That means this y is not accessible outside the block. It is defined, it is declared, but not in this scope. So it is not accessible. That means this is invalid. This is invalid. That means y is not defined. Y is not accessible. That is what actually the point is. That means example. In that example here, so this is not defined. So here you will get an error. Error is nothing but, so error is nothing but y not defined. Y not defined. Why? Because y is not inside this block. Y is outside that block. Remember, if it is var, not let, var, then it is possible. It will work, no problem. But if it is let, it is not possible. That means it cannot access it. It cannot access it. If you use this statement, inside the block, now it is possible. That means it will work. Why? Because it is accessible inside that block, inside the block. So the same example here. Now to make it correct, what we have to do is, so we have to use this technique. We need to declare and access within the block, then it is accessible. And important is where let is allowing, declaration, let is allowing rendering, and you can even initialize. Suppose I say y is equal to 40. This is initialization. That means it will support declaring, rendering, and initialization. It is working fine. It is working fine. So one point what you understood with let is let allows all the three same like var, but it is block scope. Next important point about let is let will not support shadowing. Will not support shadowing. Another point, let will not support hoisting. It is only for var. let will not support shadowing and hoisting. That means the point here is block scope variables cannot be redefined within the scope. Cannot be redefined within the scope. That's important. That means now see what here we are doing is already let y is 40. I'm using again let y is equal to 50. You saw that with var it was working fine. I'm initializing or declaring again the same. Then I refresh. It shows an error. It says that y has already been declared. Remember, if it is var, then it is having no problem. If it is var, shadowing is allowed. Well, but if it is let, shadowing will not work because already let will not allow to will not to redefine them. This is important point. That means it will not shadowing. It will not allow shadowing. So that means this is invalid. In that means already defined. Already defined. What already defined? Why already defined? So that is another important is it will not support hoisting. It will not support hoisting. Hoisting, I told you, hoisting is nothing but, so we are using here LET. Suppose you are saying y is equal to x is equal to 10 and document dot write. So x is equal to plus x. We are printing the value for x. And here I am using var x I am declaring. It will work fine because var will support hoisting. But I try here letx, and I will save this and refresh here. You have an error. Error is nothing but cannot access before initialization. This is important. That means it is saying that I cannot access. Hoisting is not supported. Hoisting is not supported for LET. That is an example. That means LET will not support hoisting. This is invalid. But that is valid if it is declared by using var, because var supports hoisting. That is what actually technically difference between var and LET. So var is for function scope, LET is for block scope. LET is for block scope. That is the difference between var and LET. And another important is const. And what you know about this const, is important is const is also block scope. So no need to explain. Const is also block scope. And very important, const supports only initialization. Const supports only initialization. You cannot declare. You cannot declare and render. It needs initialization. Mandatory. And very important is const will not support shadowing. And const will not support hoisting. That means it is more restricted than LET. It will not support anything other than initialization. No declaration, no rendering. That means, for example, suppose we are defining like this: LET x is equal to 10. So x and x equal to 10 and document dot write x is equal to plus x. It is working fine. It will get that and show. Now I am declaring by using const, and after declaring I am rendering, and you can see that it will show an error. It says that, observe carefully what it is saying: missing initializer in const declaration. That means this is const declaration. In this declaration, initializer is missing. What is initializer? That means we have to define a value like this. Now this is initializing, and I will save this and I will refresh. It's working. Now important is I am here rendering x equal to 30 and refresh. Again, error. Assignment to constant variable is not possible. Constant means it will allow only initialization. It will not support assignment. In that case, it will not allow shadowing, and it will not even allow. So shadowing is suppose const x equal to 20. Then it says you cannot redefine. Already declared. It will not allow shadowing. Obviously, it will not allow hoisting because you can't declare now. So you can't declare. Initialization is mandatory. That means it must be initialized. And shadowing and hoisting are not supported. So that is important. That means it is more restricted than LET. So Now don't ask any foolish thing like which one is best, sir. Right? What you are talking about? Actually, the point here is there is nothing like which one is best. It depends on the situation, right? According to your situation, which one, how you want to restrict your variables, that you have to define by using var, let, or const. You don't want to access outside the scope, then define block scope. You don't want anything other than initialization, then put const. So it depends on your requirement, how you configure and how do we define, right? That is the difference between var and let and const while declaring the variables. Now, still not completed. About variables, we have some more topics to understand that we will discuss tomorrow. Then you will get clarity on several more points. So no need to hurry about doubts in this part because still we have to discuss so many things about variable. You can wait. Step by step, when the concept comes, you will be clarified with every doubt related to this. Every point we will discuss, right? But I hope you understood the difference between var, let, and const. And when to use, that depends on the situation we are working with, right? And some more important points are there about variables that we will discuss in tomorrow's session. Okay, thank you.